61 murdered, 238 wounded in Israeli terror wave. Yasser Arafat pledges to eliminate Israel. Israel goes to the polls to decide the fate of Jerusalem and the Golan.
The terrorist death toll since the inception of the Israeli government's peace process broke the 200 barrier. In 4 separate attacks on February 25th, 26th, March 3rd, and 4th, 61 were slain and 238 wounded in the worst terrorist attacks in Israeli history. Striking in the very heart of Israel, the Hamas organization has proven that Israel's new, reduced borders are as porous as Swiss cheese and nearly indefensible against terrorist incursions. On February 25th, early morning rush hour in Jerusalem was disrupted by the total obliteration of the number 18 bus. 28 were killed and 76 injured. Among the dead were 22-year-old Sarah Duker and her 25-year-old fiancé, Matthew Eisenfeld, both from New Jersey. The next day, an Arab American deliberately drove his car into a busy Jerusalem bus stop, killing 2 and injuring 22. Just a few days later, on the same number 18 bus in Jerusalem, at roughly the same time, another Hamas suicide bomber killed himself and 19 others. Bits of bodies were everywhere as the dead lined the street.
People had legs, everything, something terrible. I don't know how to explain.
Very hard picture, a bus that really was exploded totally, and bodies all over the place.
Burying the dead has become a way of life for Israelis. The very next day, the calm of Tel Aviv's Dizengoff Center was literally shattered when another suicide bomber blew himself and 14 others to bits in front of some outdoor ATM machines in front of Israel's busiest shopping center. Among the dead were many children. 130 were injured and many more were in shock. President Clinton convened an international anti-terrorism conference in Egypt on March 13th and visited Israel on March 14th. Most political analysts believe this was done to bolster Prime Minister Shimon Peres. President Clinton did, however, meet with Likud leader Benjamin Netanyahu. These terror incidents are part and parcel of Hamas's ongoing war, not against peace, but against the Jews and the Jewish state. They're engaged in a good cop, bad cop game, along with Yasser Arafat, who condemns terror, but then does nothing about it, has not disarmed or shut down Hamas or Islamic Jihad, despite a 30,000-man army under his control. It is like a scene from Casablanca, perfunctory roundups of the usual suspects.
Major Strasser has been shot. Round up the usual suspects.
Among the most notorious terrorist attacks in recent years are the January 1995 Beit Lid bombing.
It was early Sunday morning, January 22nd, at the rural Beit Lid bus stop in central Israel. Young Israeli soldiers returning to their bases after spending the Jewish Sabbath at home with their families were waiting for their buses. Out of the blue, in 2 separate explosions, 2 Islamic Jihad suicide bombers blew themselves and 21 Israelis to smithereens. Body parts were everywhere. 21 were killed and more than 60 seriously injured. Victims were rushed to ambulances, but for most, it was too late.
And also, the October 1994 Dizengoff bus bombing. This was our report on that incident at that time.
Picture this. You're riding the bus home from school, work, or shopping. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, your bus is blown to pieces. Wednesday afternoon, October 19th, Tel Aviv's number 5 bus traveling Dizengoff Street. An explosion turns the bus into mangled, twisted wreckage. Bodies and body parts were lying all over the street. Medical teams rushed to help the scores of wounded, and police sealed off Tel Aviv's busiest street. 23 died in one of the worst acts of terror in Israel's history. The bomb shattered glass and damaged apartments several floors above street level, along with a bus passing in the other direction.
8 times as many Israelis have either been killed or wounded than were prior to the start of the Oslo peace process. There may be peace agreements, but there has been a simultaneous erosion of security. PLO chief Yasser Arafat condemns terror in English, but to his own people in Arabic, he sings a totally different tune. At a summit meeting of Arab foreign ministers in Stockholm, Sweden in January, Arafat said he sees the collapse of Israel and the establishment of a Palestinian state as imminent. Arafat said, the PLO will now concentrate on splitting Israel psychologically into 2 camps. Within 5 years, we will have 6 to 7 million Arabs living in the West Bank and in Jerusalem. Arafat has his own right of return strategy, in which Muslims will be brought in from outside in order to overwhelm the Jewish population. He said, we will make life unbearable for Jews by psychological warfare and population explosion. Jews will not want to live among Arabs. I have no use for Jews. And that's not all. On assumption of control of Ramallah, Arafat boldly declared that today we begin our path towards an independent Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital. In Bethlehem, at Christmas, with a straight face, he and his associates stated repeatedly that Jesus was a Palestinian. At the funeral last month for the engineer, Yihya Ayash, attended by 250,000 in Gaza, Arafat called him a martyr despite Ayash's responsibility for several murderous Israeli bus bombings. Lastly, on PLO television almost nightly, Arafat calls for jihad, holy war against Israel. Here is actual footage taken from PLO TV recently.
هنصلي جميعا إن شاء الله ونجلس هذه الجلسة في القدس الشريف. القدس الشريف شاء من شاء القدس الشريف عاصمة دولة فلسطين، شاء من شاء وأبى من أبى واللي مش عاجبه يشرب في البحر.
هكذا نحن جميعا مشاريع شهادة على طريق الحق، على طريق القضية المقدسة، على طريق القدس عاصمة دولة فلسطين. نعم يا إخواني، فلسطين مهرها غالي، وهذا الشعب شعب الجبارين، من عليه الله العلي القدير بهذه المنة وبهذه المنحة، لأننا في رباط إلى يوم الدين. نعم، هذه منة من الله العلي القدير، وهم في رباط إلى يوم الدين. كلمات تصغر ولا يبقى في النفس إلا هذه الأصالة، وإلا هذا العهد والقسم الذي تعهدنا عليه جميعا. العهد هو العهد والقسم هو القسم، أن نستمر في هذا الجهاد الطويل والجهاد الصعب والجهاد الشاق، طريق الشهداء، طريق التضحيات، ولكنه طريق النصر، طريق العزة، ليس فقط للشعب الفلسطيني، ولكن العزة لأمتنا العربية، لأمتنا الإسلامية.
بالحجر الفلسطيني المقدس، بالحجر الفلسطيني المقدس، نعم بالحجر الفلسطيني المقدس. 7 سنوات الخطابة وانتصر الجنرال الفلسطيني، انتصر الجنرال الفلسطيني، الجنرال الطفل الفلسطيني، الجنرال الطفل الفلسطيني انتصروا على جنرالات إسرائيل، على جنرالات إسرائيل. وإمتى يا اخوانا؟ وإمتى يا اخوانا؟ بعد إيش يا اخوانا؟ بعد ما ظنوا إنه استطاعوا أن ينهوا منظمة التحرير الفلسطينية. بعد إيش يا اخوانا؟ بعد حصار بيروت، وبعد مذبحة شتيلة الأولى من شارون وشتيلة الثانية من الجوارين الآخرين يا اخوانا. نعم يا اخوانا، ظنوا أن انتهت الثورة الفلسطينية، انتهت الثورة الفلسطينية.
On May 29th, Israelis go to the polls. Never in Israel's history has the choice been as clear, like black and white. 4 more years of labor under Shimon Peres, withdrawal to the pre-1967 situation, escalating terror, compromise on Jerusalem, and the abandonment of the Zionist dream. Or peace through strength, reaffirming Jewish rights throughout the land of Israel. Suppression and eradication of terror along with secure, defensible borders. A secure Israel is critical to American strategic interests in the Middle East. One major area before Israeli voters is the ultimate fate of the Golan Heights. Peres wants to give it away to Syria. Take a look at the situation for yourselves.
Four years and this will all be fruit. Nothing can top that. Do you know how hard it is to build a settlement? How many seeds make a single tree? How many children must be born and grow?
When I grow up, I want to work in the apple orchard. When I grow up, I'll work in the barn.
In ancient times, our forefathers made fine wines and sold them all over the Middle East.
We found an abundance of stones here decorated with Jewish symbols, like the grapevine, oil lamps, ram's horn, the 4 species, and occasionally Aramaic or Hebrew inscriptions. The most important inscription from the ancient village of Devorah reads, "This is the house of learning of Rabbi Eliezer HaKapar."
Rabbi Elazar HaKapar established the synagogues and schools of the Babylonian exile in Eretz Yisrael. The synagogue at Katzrin is the most impressive synagogue discovered on the Golan. The oldest synagogue discovered in Israel is also here, dating back to temple times, the synagogue at Gamla.
The Romans waged a very difficult battle in order to conquer Gamla. The Jews fought bravely. The question is, why were they so willing to sacrifice their lives for their city? A small coin was found of bronze with one side inscribed with the word redemption, and on the other side, Jerusalem the Holy. I was in shock. Until now, I thought the people of Gamla fought for their city, their community. It became clear to me that they fought for the redemption of Jerusalem. Syria used the Golan as a jumping-off point to attack Israel. She tried twice, and twice was defeated. Now they want the area back, including the last pebble, the last drop of water. To return the Syrians to the Golan, to the banks of the Jordan and the Kinneret, is a gamble and a threat to our existence.
The Syrians lived right over our heads, and they bombarded us constantly. They bombed the fields, the tractors, the children's house, the dining room. In the Six-Day War, the kibbutz was really demolished. When we went up to the Golan after the war, it was the shock of our lives. We were standing there at Khirbet Tawfiq, just over kibbutz Tel Katzir. I sat down and cried. How could I have raised my children here for the past 18 years with the Syrians perched above, viewing our every move? I sit up here, and without the aid of binoculars, I can see the cactus plants in my garden. You can only live in a place like this if you have belief and ideology. Standing here in a Syrian bunker and knowing who sat here and what they did to the settlements below, I say to myself, what you see from here, you'll never see anywhere else. It's for our eyes only, even in peacetime, for our eyes only.
Ramat HaGolan is a small area, but important to our survival, because the line of defense of the Galilee crosses the Golan. The Rokad and the Yarmouk rivers in southern Golan and the Hermon in the north are natural obstacles. The eastern Golan is a gateway to the entire eastern frontier, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. This gateway is mainly blocked by a series of hills. These hills are a natural deterrent and provide minimal warning time, preventing a surprise attack. The boundaries today follow the hills and enable us to control the area using minimum manpower. Pulling back the line to the pre-1967 borders demands a much larger defense force facing the Golan. Mount Hermon is the eyes of the country. Whoever sits there sees the Shalom Tower as well as deep into Syrian territory. The Syrians know it too. It's a fact. The border with Syria has been our quietest border over the past 20 years. The Golan is the security line of Israel, and security is a necessary element for peace. Another fact. The Golan controls 1/3 of Israel's water resources. The Kinneret Reservoir, including the Jordan headwaters and the Golan streams. Any attempt to block these tributaries will cause a war. A war over water was already waged in the 60s. The Syrians attempted to divert the headwaters of the Jordan and the Golan streams to feed into their new water carrier. The line of diversionary canals remains a scar that crosses the entire Golan. Only under Israeli control can the Jordan River headwaters and tributaries feeding the reservoirs be protected from closure. The Golan is undeniably an important security property. Even if one day we discover a way to protect Israel's water supply without the Golan, we cannot turn back the clock. An entire generation has already sunk roots here and has made the Golan an integral part of Israel.
If they want a temporary settlement in the area, they would have established additional military bases or Nahal installations. There were other alternatives for a temporary solution, but the intention was exactly the opposite, permanent settlement. I bore my 4 children here. My mother also settled here. My oldest daughter has already finished the army, and my oldest son is just before military service. This was the intention exactly, that people would raise their families here and stay put.
27 years ago we came here, and you know what? There was nothing here but minefields, burned out tanks, rusting cars and trucks, and we made it into a fertile and productive area. That's what I call the true pioneer spirit. That's the essence of Zionism. So what do we do now? Pack up and move for a piece of paper from Hafez al-Assad? I don't think it's worth it.
The Oslo II Treaty has resulted in Israeli withdrawals from most Arab towns and villages in Judea and Samaria. A final agreement, if labor stays in power, will result in a Palestinian state. Speaking on the dangers inherent in labor's policies was General Aharon Levran, chairman of the Officers Forum for National Strength, an organization of thousands of top Israeli officers opposed to labor's policies. General Levran spoke to a gathering of the Likud USA Young Leadership recently.
A policy that transferred parts of our homeland as real estate. And I'm quoting real estate. And this was done under the guise of a fictitious, illusionary peace. A policy that surrendered to terrorism and to terrorists, gave prize to terrorists. And we haven't achieved one moment of peace. On the contrary, the number of the victims of terror has tripled to something like 160 people were killed and some 700 were wounded. A policy that is advancing the establishment of a Palestinian state, and every one of us knows exactly what a Palestinian state means, and if it doesn't, I can assure you that this policy will create terrible dangers security-wise, and if there will be a war, it will be conducted from under inferior conditions. A policy that is ready to give away the whole of the Golan, not a territorial compromise, the whole of the Golan, into whom? To a tyrant minority in Syria, this Assad who gassed something like 15 to 20,000 of his own people in Al-Hama a decade ago. And by that, we are abandoning the security of Israel. And again, I quote, all the quotations are from Mr. Rabin himself. And the way how this policy was conducted, it trampled half of the people of Israel by miserable, unacceptable agreements that their failure was proven on the ground, and created a situation for half of the people of Israel of helplessness, frustration, anxiety, and anger. Look, people are entitled to change their minds, but this government hasn't come to power in Israel on this platform. And we have to remember all these things. And by the way, if words do kill, this very government should have stopped long ago negotiations with Arafat. What is Arafat talking all the time? He talks about jihad. What is jihad if not killing people with the most brutal methods?
If you believe in the territorial integrity of the land of Israel, if you think giving $500 million in U.S. aid to Yasser Arafat is a bad investment of taxpayers' money, if the notion of Israel relinquishing the Golan and placing U.S. troops there is a bad idea, if the possibility of splitting up Jerusalem doesn't sit well with you, you are not alone. Likud USA stands with you and stands up for good, old-fashioned, common-sense Zionism. And that's why the thousands of Likud members across the U.S. have produced and paid for this program. You can join us by writing or calling when the address and phone number appear on your screen. Thanks for letting us share some time with you. I'm Caroline Greenberg. Goodbye.
It began in 1925 with Ze'ev Jabotinsky, a movement led by giants like former Prime Ministers Menachem Begin and Yitzhak Shamir. And it's moving forward today with Benjamin Netanyahu. It's the future of Zionism. It's the Likud. Be a member, not a spectator. Join today, Likud USA.